What's up, my people? Welcome back. Today I'm going to be going through a full tutorial on understanding the custom action block within Voiceflow and working with chat widget extensions. Being able to master those two aspects as custom action block and chat widget extensions will enable you build really powerful chatbots where, for example, you can implement whether it's a date picker within your chat window, whether it's a HTML form within the chat window, or a payment model to handle payments. Understanding chat widget extensions extends the power within your Voiceflow chatbot to be able to handle various functionalities. So let's get right into it. So here I have a blank Voiceflow agent canvas, and you can see it's just saying start. So what I want to start with is understanding the custom action block. It seems like a very basic block, but there's a lot of power that lies within it. So let's get into it. One of the things that custom action enables you to do is rendering things dynamically within the Voiceflow chatbot. Let's say, for example, I want to render some buttons. Okay, so let me just quickly do that. What I'd have to do is just drag this over here and say I want to listen for some buttons. The first button, let's give it a name, btn1. Then let's add two other buttons. Okay, so we have now 3 buttons. Okay, so now let's run this, but before we run it, let's open the inspect tab within the website. So Ctrl+Shift+I, so that we can be able to see what's happening in the background. Okay, so let me widen it a bit. There you go. Now I'm in the network tab, so ensure you go to the network tab over here. Then ensure you filter for requests that have the interact endpoint. Okay, so over here you can see it's already put in, so but on your side ensure you type in interact over there. Then what you want to do is click start. Okay, you see it renders 3 buttons into the chat window, and there are 2 requests that appear on the right side over here. So one that is status of 200 means that's successfully run. Click on that. Then what I want to do is, let me just expand this for you to be able to see it. Then go to the response tab, scroll to the top, then minimize where you see state, minimize that. That's irrelevant at this point. So this is the meat, what we want to understand here. So what is a trace? A trace is whatever is being rendered into the chat window. If the buttons are being rendered, if you see some buttons rendered into the chatbot, that is trace of type choice. If you see a carousel, let's say containing images, that is trace of type carousel. Okay, if you see just a message rendered into the chat window, something like, hey, I'm here for you, my name is Zawadi, I can help you with whatever, that is a statement. That is a trace of type text. Okay, so being able to understand that will come in handy as I continue with this. Okay, so let's scroll down till the bottom where we see the trace, the final trace, which is this. So you see that is a trace of type choice, and in the payload, okay, we have some buttons. Okay, and the buttons is an array, or rather a list of buttons. The first button is this, containing the name of the button, which is btn1, the request. Okay, so we have an event which has a request of type that and a payload of that. Okay, so don't mind me, it seems like a lot of code, but I'll be able to explain all this. So what I want us to do is just minimize this from the payload over here, then copy everything as this. So select that, expand it, then right click and do copy. Okay, so after you copy that, so this is the payload that we'll use so that we can render these buttons dynamically without having to use the buttons block within Voiceflow. So let me just now exit from the inspect tab, then exit here. And what I want to do is just select all this, delete. Then I'll use the custom action block to render the buttons dynamically. So I'll just drag it in there. The name of the custom action matches the trace type. Okay, so the type of trace you're trying to render. So in this case it's buttons, which was, as we saw, was trace of type choice. Okay, if you put choices over there, it doesn't work. If you put choice misspelled, doesn't work. So that's choice. In the action body, we'll just paste in the payload that we got from the inspect tab as is. Then let's just exit this, connect the block as meant to, then let's run. Let's see whether it's able to render it dynamically. Okay, you see that we have button 1, button 2, button 3. So that's working appropriately. So now you're able to see the power within custom action. It seems like a simple example, but once you understand the basics of how it works, you can be able to render whatever it is. It can be, let's say you're calling your database so that you can get back product images so that you can display a carousel back to the user. If you understand how to use a custom action block to render those carousel of the product images, you'll be able to render them dynamically and also save a lot of space within your canvas so that you're not using a lot of blocks to just do a simple task. Okay, so let's do an example here. Let's say I want to render 10 buttons within the canvas. Okay, we can assume that these buttons I've gotten them from calling my database, retrieving, let's say, some information that will be displayed within the buttons. So in this case, let's just delete this and have a JavaScript block with before. So in this JavaScript block, I just want to create some buttons. What I'll do is just say let btns. I'll create a variable. It's an empty array, or rather a list. Then what I want to do is loop through, and let's say let I is equals to 0 as long as I is less than 10. So I want to create 10 buttons. As long as that's the case, increment that index. Then I can say here, so I want to create a button each time I loop through this for loop. Okay, so what I want to do here is just come back here to my payload, then copy everything as is, because this will serve as a guiding point. So go back to my JavaScript, then I can just quickly save it here. So something like let payload, paste that in there. Okay, but since I don't need the entirety of all that, what I'll do is just copy one of the buttons. Okay, so this will serve as our reference point. Okay, Control C, come and save it here. So that's how a single button looks like. Let me just structure it properly. So, and this is how the payload will look like. So empty buttons. So let me just remove all this till there so that I can remain with this. So this is the payload that will send back to the custom action. Okay, so let's paste it in there, and you can now remove this here. So now I want to loop through and insert a button for each time we loop through the for loop. So Control C that, come and paste it in here. Okay, let me structure it properly. Then here in btn, we can say btn plus the specific index that we are in. Okay, so that you can say btn1 or btn2 or btn3 and so on and so forth. Okay, so with that being said, and in the request type over here, let me just say something like or default path. Okay, something like that. I'll show you why this comes in handy. So default path. Then in the payload here, I can just say something like I want to pass in button name, and that button name is that specific button. Okay, so Control C that, let me paste this in here. Okay, so now let's insert that buttons array over here. So that's btns. Okay, what have I done? So over here, let me just take this as is. What I want to do is do btns dot push. So I want to push an object containing the specific button that we want to insert. Okay, so with that being said, we have our payload here in place. But before we pass this payload as is into the custom action block over here, we need to turn it into a string, because the custom action block only accepts a payload that is a string. So for that, let's have this here and do let payload, or rather let's create a variable called payload so that we can insert it into our custom action. So come back here in the variables, let's create it payload. Control enter to save that, then go back to our workflows. Then here in the JavaScript, we can be like payload is equals to JSON dot stringify. Let's turn this and call it JS payload. Okay, JS payload. Okay, so with this in place, we can now go back here and insert it into the custom action body. So I'll Control A, select all that, then insert our payload that we had created. Okay, so it's a variable, so have it in curly braces. Then in the paths here, we need to have the path to be the same name as the request type within the buttons. So you see this request type over here is the path it will follow when that button has been clicked. Okay, so have it there as default path. If I had different paths over here, whenever someone clicks on that specific button and I want it to follow a specific path, I'd give it a different name. So let's say default path 1. okay, over here. Then here in the path, I'd have it as default path 1. Okay, so with that being said, let me just connect things as meant to. So let me forward this here, and when they pass through default path 1, we want just to come here. First, let's obtain the payload within the buttons. Okay, so that's a JavaScript step, and we can still save it to the variable we created, which was payload. So you can say payload is equal to last event, okay, dot payload dot, what was the name of the payload, and the last event is this. Let me show you. This is the last event. So when they click on the button, this is the last event that will be sent. Okay, so last event dot payload dot button name. Okay, so let me go back to my JavaScript here, dot button name. Okay, then I can quickly just stringify it so that I don't need to stringify it because it's already a string. So what I'll do, I'll just display it as a message. So text message, and the message is a payload. Okay, so with this in place, let's just forward it even if it's failed. Same case here. Then let's run. Okay, oh, and before we do that, ensure over here you say stop on action, because by default the custom action block will always flow to the next block. But what we want to do is we want it only to flow to the next block when there's been an interaction with the custom action itself. So that is, in this case, someone has clicked on a button, and we don't want to flow to the next step until someone has clicked on a button. So that's why it's critical to stop on action. Okay, so escape there. Let me start again. So you can see the buttons over there. Then when I click btn1, it prints out btn1. So you see that works. If I try that again, if I click, let's say btn2, you see it says btn2. So that's working. So now that you have understood how the custom action block works, so next we go into the understanding the custom widget extensions. But before we do that, it's critical to understand what happens in the background when a user is interacting with the chatbot. So for that, I have a diagram I'll show you. So here you see on Figma, I've created a design here. This is you see these 3 blocks you're seeing over here is what happens in the background whenever someone is interacting with the chatbot. Okay, so you're seeing here, this is a front end, that's a user interface, the chat window. And when someone interacts with the chatbot, there is in the middle here, there's a dialog management API that handles the interaction between the Voiceflow agent, which is our Voiceflow agent over here, whatever we build over here, and the actual chatbot within the website. Okay, it can be the website or WhatsApp, wherever it is. So this is the front end. So when, let's say, a user types in something like, hi, my name is Mutiso, I'm looking for this. Okay, then they click enter. When they click enter, that is an action. That action will be passed through the dialog management API to our Voiceflow agent. Then the Voiceflow agent will return a trace. Okay, and that trace will be of type text, so that specific message appears within the chat window. So that message of, hi, my name is Mutiso, I need help with this, will appear within the chat window as a trace of type text. So the dialog management API works to connect our Voiceflow agent in the background with our chat window, which is the front end that the user will interact with. Okay, so an action is sent to the Voiceflow agent, and the Voiceflow agent returns a trace. Okay, this is how it looks in front of the user, but this is the actual code that will be in the HTML file. So this is the same code that you get when you're deploying your chatbot to, let's say, a website or wherever, and this you can get when you go to your Voiceflow agent. If I come back here, then I go to integrations, then I go to web chat. This is the code that will render the chat widget on the website. So this is the code, and you can see it over here. Okay, so that's how it works. But now when we incorporate the thing we have mentioned called extensions, extending the power within our Voiceflow chatbot becomes a bit complex. So let me explain how it works. So you see, it's the same thing, but instead of the Voiceflow agent working alone, we add the custom action block. So the same way the dialog management API works to connect our Voiceflow agent with our front-end interface, our custom action block works to connect our Voiceflow agent with our chat widget extensions. Okay, so in this case, this is the chat widget. Then the chat widget extensions, it can be a form we are trying to insert into the chat widget. It can be a date picker, so someone can pick the date. It can be a payment model that's rendered into the chat window. Those are extensions. So this custom action block works to connect our Voiceflow agent with that specific extension. Okay, and in code, this is how it looks. The same code that we use to deploy the chatbot, but in addition to that, we import our extensions. As you can see here, we're importing these following extensions, then we insert those extensions within our chatbot. And I'll make it make sense. I know it seems a bit complex, but I'll make it make sense. Okay, so in the case of using our custom action block over here, to be able to trigger and get that specific extension that we want to use, a custom action trace is sent back to the chat widget over here. And how does the custom action trace look like? Let me show you. This is how the custom action trace looks like. If you remember, when we opened the inspect tab when we were running the chatbot to understand the custom action, you saw there were other traces, then the final trace. So this final trace you're seeing over here is the custom action trace of type this. Okay, so this is the name of our custom action. Okay, and if you go back to our Voiceflow, and if I enter custom action over here, whatever name we give over here, let's say test extension over here, then we give it some paths, let's say path 1 and path 2, then I open the inspect tab, then I run the chatbot. Okay, you can see here some requests are sent in. Then if I expand this, then I go to this specific request that has a status of 200. Then let me minimize the state over here. You can see, let me scroll till the bottom here, you see this specific trace. Okay, and sometimes here you'll see the trace will be called here test extension, but in other cases Voiceflow will insert it within the payload name. So, and that's, you'll see how this comes in handy when we are actually trying to implement the extension practically. Okay, so you'll see sometimes it will be within the trace type, and sometimes it will be within trace.payload.name. Okay, so you're seeing test extension over here. Okay, so you're seeing here, back here to the custom action trace, here in the payload, it will have the payload.name and the name of that specific custom action name. Okay, so this is what it will be sent back to the chat widget front end, so that the HTML file can be able to pick the specific extension to work with. So now let's implement this practically. Okay, here I have an empty index.html, so I'll quickly just I'll quickly implement our chatbot within this. Let me just give it a title, so let's say h1 of chatbot. Okay, then below here is where we'll insert our script tag that will have the chatbot. Okay, so this we can get back in our Voiceflow. So I make exit here, then go back here to where we see integration, web chat, then copy this code as is and come and paste it in here. Okay, save that. Okay, then come back to my Voiceflow over here. Just want to render something quickly, so something like a message, which is a text message saying hi. Then let me exit here, and for this to work, you need to publish before you go and deploy it to, let's say, your website. So publish that, successfully published. Let me go back to my VS Code over here. And what I'll do is save this, open the terminal, then I'll do npx serve. Okay, you see it said copied local address to clipboard. I can go and open my Google Chrome, open a new tab and paste it in there, enter. You can see here the chatbot has been rendered, so let me just click on it, and you can see it says hi. Okay, then it ends the conversation. So now that's working. Okay, so there are two types of extensions in Voiceflow. One is a response extension, and the next one is an effect extension. Okay, so a response extension is when you want to render something within the chat widget. Okay, for example, rendering a form, a HTML form within the chat widget. That is a response extension. But in cases where you're not rendering something into the chat widget, you just want to perform a certain action, then move on with the chat conversation, that's an effect extension. So you're not rendering something within the chat widget. Okay, so to be able to create your extensions, I'd suggest that you create a separate JavaScript file within the same folder of your HTML file is in, so that you can create your extensions over here, then import them within your HTML file. You could also still create your extensions within the same HTML file. It can be within this script tag, but the thing is, this will be so cluttered, especially if you have so many extensions. Your HTML file will have a lot of code. Or for example, here I can create a quick extension. So okay, let's call it extension 1. Okay, then it's an object that takes in 4 properties. One is the name of the extension, next is the type of extension, then next is a property called match, which tries to match the trace that's been sent back from the Voiceflow agent. That specific trace type, does it match the specific extension that we want to render? Okay, so in this case, let's create it practically. So the name of the extension, you can call it extension 1. Then the type of extension, in this case it can be a response extension. Then we want to match. Okay, what do we want to match? We'll take in a trace. Okay, then we want to check if the trace dot type, so this is a trace that's been sent back from the Voiceflow agent. If you remember in the diagram I'd shown you over here, the Voiceflow agent sends back a trace to the chat widget over here. The chat widget is this code you're seeing over here. So we want to check the trace that's been sent back, is the trace type matching the specific extension that we are trying to render. Okay, so going back here, if I go back here, this is an example of that specific trace. So we want to check the trace.type, does it have that specific name? So you see here, if trace.type equal to extension 1, okay, extension 1, or trace.payload.name equal to extension 1, if this is the case, then we can move on and know that this is the extension we are trying to render. Okay, and you remember I mentioned that specifically the trace.type can contain the name of the custom action, or the name of the custom action could appear within the payload itself. Okay, the next is what we want to render. Okay, so if it's a trace of type response, the 4th property is called render. But if the trace is of type effect, the 4th property will be called effect. Okay, so in this case it's render. Then we want to take in the trace that we have gotten back from the Voiceflow agent, then the element we want to render within the chat widget. Okay, so then we have this here. So first of all, we could have this as, so we could, let's say for example, render a form within the chat widget. So for that, let's create a variable called form container. For this, we'll do document dot create element. The type of element we're trying to create is a form. Okay, then within the form itself, we want to insert some input fields. So form container dot inner HTML is equals to, but you see it's starting to be cluttered, so I think let's just transfer this to our extensions.js as is. So I'll just copy this as is, Control X, remove this script tag. Then in my extensions.js, I can export const extension 1. Okay, then let me save this, and how I'll continue with implementing the entire extension, but let me show you how we'll insert it within our chat widget. So I'll just come back here. Okay, then within this script tag, let me transform this into a type module. Okay, so transforming this script tag into a type module enables us to import, so to use the import keyword to import anything from external JavaScript files. So for this, we want to import some extensions from our ./extensions.js. Okay, then the specific extension in this case is called extension 1. So let me copy that, come and paste it in here. So that's the extension. And how we insert it within our chat widget is we come here after version ID, comma, there's a property called assistant, and the assistant takes in some extensions, which is an array, or rather a list of specific extensions. So the first extension is extension 1 that we've imported. Okay, let me save this, then come back here, then let's include the input fields that we want within the form container. Let me just paste it in here. Okay, then save this, and after creating our form, we can quickly just insert this form within the chat widget. And how we do this is I'll do element, so trying to call the element that we have brought in over here, dot append child, then we insert the form container. Save this. So this is an example of a response extension. So after saving this, going back to my HTML and ensuring everything has been imported very well, the extension, and it's been inserted within the chat widget, I can go to my Voiceflow agent, okay, over here, then create a custom action block. As I mentioned, the custom action block is what will connect our Voiceflow agent to that specific extension we are trying to render. So in this case, let me just insert our custom action. The name of the custom action, remember, if I go back to my HTML file here, or rather our extension over here, is this extension 1. Okay, so this is what we're trying to get. Let me paste it in there, extension 1. And in the action body, you can pass in whatever information that you want to pass from the Voiceflow agent to your chat widget extension. In this case, we don't have any, so we'll leave it as empty. Then we can stop on action, so that we only want to proceed if someone has submitted something through the form. Okay, so with this being said, we can quickly just publish this. Okay, successfully published. So when we run the chatbot, if I go back here to our website over here, then I reload this, then I run this chatbot, what should happen is it should hit the custom action block over here, then send that specific trace back to the front end, which is our chat widget. Then it will check, is there an extension that matches the custom action name that we have said over here, which is extension 1. If that's the case, it will go with that specific extension. And in our case, our extension, as we're seeing here, is rendering a form within the chat widget. So let's see if that works. So I've reloaded the page. Let me click on this, start a new chat, and you see the form is displayed there. Okay, so let's give it a bit of styling so that it looks a bit better. Back to my HTML file over here, just above these input fields over here, I'll insert a style tag including some CSS styling. So I'll paste it in there. Let me just indent it properly. Okay, so that's in place. Let me save that and let's try it again. Start a new chat. You see, there you go, our form is there, well styled up. Okay, so with this being said, how do we pass in whatever information has been gotten from this form field back to our Voiceflow agent so that it can be used within our Voiceflow agent? So for this, let's do some JavaScript. So let me scroll down here, and what I want to do is, before appending the form container within our chat widget, I want to add an event listener. So form container.add event listener. I want to listen for an event of type submit. Okay, then if that's the case, we want to run this specific function. Okay, we'll take in that specific event, then we'll do e.prevent default. This prevents the page from reloading, because the default functionality is when the form is submitted, the entire page reloads, but we don't want that. So we'll have that as is. Then we want to obtain each of those input fields from the form. So you're seeing the name, the email, and the phone. Okay, and you can see this, we're trying to select from the class, and you can see the class over here. Then next, we want to check if these are valid. So before we submit the information back to our Voiceflow agent, we want to ensure that whatever they have inputted is valid. So this code will handle that. So yeah, if the name.check validity, so if the JavaScript checks and finds that the name field is incorrect, or, so we'll add or, the same thing for the email. So I'll just copy this as is, paste it in here, and email, then same case for the phone. Okay, so if it checks and sees that any of these fields is incorrect, then we want to add the class of invalid, so that the input field has a red line surrounding it, telling the user that they need to enter the correct information. So you're seeing we're adding those classes as meant to. Then we are doing return, so that we exit off this specific function, so that they can try and input the information again. So with this being said, let's save this. Then after this, after we've done this and we found out that everything is okay, so we haven't exited from the function, we want to submit the information back to our Voiceflow agent. Okay, and for that we'll use window.voiceflow.chat.interact. okay, so that we send a request back to our Voiceflow agent of type. Okay, and this type should match the specific path we're trying to follow within our custom action. So let me go back to our Voiceflow agent. Over here, our default path, we have it here. We can call this let's say incomplete. Okay, and we add another path called complete. Okay, always remember that this first one is the default path. So if I come back here and the request type is something whatever, then I pass in the payload, okay, containing, let's say, our name, okay, the name field over here dot value, so the value that we've gotten from it, and same case for the email and the phone. Okay, so if you have it this way, this will still work, but it will follow the default path, because the paths that we have been provided over here, none of them match whatever we are trying to put in over here. So it will go with the default path, which is incomplete. So let's just do, if it's incomplete, let's do a message, or rather let's first try obtaining whatever is being passed on from the payload. So for that, we'll capture it with a JavaScript step. Okay, and it's always in the last event. So we'll do payload. I think we created a variable called payload, and let's say payload is equal to last event dot payload. Okay, then we can stringify it. So payload, because we're going to render it within the chat widget, so JSON dot stringify our payload. Then after turning it into a string, let's render it within our text message payload. Okay, so that way. Then we can do the same thing for in case it's a complete. Okay, so copy all this, Control C, then let's paste it in here. Then let me just bring this closer over here, and instead of this we say complete, and that's the payload, and in this case let's say this one to be incomplete. Okay, so with that being said, let's just connect this as intended to, then let's publish this. Successfully published. Go back here, then let me reload this. So let me submit in some information. So that mutiso at gmail.com and a phone number of that. Then I click submit. You see it passes through the path of incomplete, okay, because that's the default path. Because when we check over here, this path is just gibberish, okay, and it's not existent within the paths that we have stated within the Voiceflow agent. So for this to work, let's call this complete. So it will pass in through the path of complete. Then let me save this. Let's try it again. Reload this, start a new chat. Then let me pass in whatever name it is, whatever email address, and a phone number. Submit this. You can see it passes through the path of complete. Okay, if I'd explicitly said passing through the path of incomplete, you can still work with that. Save that, go reload this, then let's start a new chat. Pass in whatever name, whatever email, and a phone number, then submit, and you can see it passes through the path of incomplete. So that's how that works. Okay, and also I'd want it such that once we've submitted, this button escapes, so this button disappears. So I'll just add in a code just above this interact code. So I'll just paste it in here just like that. So then when I save this, so this is just trying to capture that specific button, which is this one. You can see this button over here, it has a class of submit. So we obtain that button, then we remove it from the chat widget. So if I save this, reload this, then we try this again, start a new chat, whatever name, whatever email address, and a phone number, submit. You see the button escapes, and we have those details obtained. Okay, so that's working. Okay, so now you've understood how to work with the response extension. That is an extension that is rendering something within the chat widget. But now let's look into the other type, which is an effect extension. So for that, let's create a next extension. Let's call it extension 2. So export a variable called extension 2. Okay, then it's an object. Okay, with a name, give it a name of, let's say, extension 2. Doesn't matter, so the name of this doesn't really matter. Then the type of extension is, in our case, called effect. Okay, then we want to match, okay, where the trace that's being sent back from the Voiceflow agent is trace.type equal to extension 2. And you remember, this is the custom action name within Voiceflow over here. Okay, so this custom action name is what we put in over here. Okay, or, so that's how you do or in JavaScript, where the trace.payload.name equal to extension 2. Okay, so if that's the case, it means this is a specific extension we want to work with. So as you remember, in this case we're not rendering something like above how we are doing over here, but in this case it's an effect. So we'll do effect, okay, then we take in the trace, then we want to do something after we get the trace. Okay, so we want to do something over here. And one thing I want to touch in, you don't really need to obtain the trace over here if you're not retrieving information from your Voiceflow agent. If you remember above here, when we're implementing the response extension over here, we obtained the trace over here, but we really didn't use it within our extension. But if in case we're passing in, let's say, information from our Voiceflow agent back to our extension over here, we're able to obtain that. So I think before going into this response extension, let's simulate an example of where that will work in. So for example, here in our form field, we'd want to pass in the name. Immediately the form is rendered within the chat widget. How do we do that? Okay, so for that, I'll come in here, obtain that specific input field, so input name, and let me say form container dot query selector, and I want to obtain the one that has a class of name. Okay, then after obtaining that, I want to insert input name to have a default value when it's starting, and that value we obtain it from our trace payload. So trace dot payload dot name. Okay, and for this, let me go back to our Voiceflow agent over here. Within the custom action body, we pass in that specific name. Okay, so this is a JSON name, and the name is Mutiso Madime in this case. Okay, then for this, we can exit and publish this. Then when we publish this, whenever we run the chatbot, that specific payload will be passed back to our chat widget. Okay, so you can see trace.payload.name. So when we try coming back here and reloading this, so let's run it over here. Oh, it's not working. Let's see. So going back here. Oh, here it's meant to have a dot. So because we're trying to obtain the input field that has a class of name, and the class is represented by a dot. Okay, so save this, go back here, let's reload this and see if it works. Start chat. See, there you go, and you see the payload, that is the name we got from the Voiceflow agent, is being rendered into it. So this is an example of where you'd use the trace when you're rendering a response extension. Okay, so going back here now, let's continue creating our extension, our second extension here. In this case, we want this extension to perform an action, in this case performing a confetti. Okay, so if you're aware, confetti, like when you have a birthday party, then someone does uses that, it looks like a pipe, then when you pull it releases some papers like confetti. Okay, so we're able to do this. So it's an effect because we're not rendering something within the chat widget. Okay, so how do we do this? In this case, we don't really need the trace. Okay, so we can just leave that as empty. Okay, so here I'll paste in the code for the confetti. So this is how it works. Let me indent it properly. So you don't really need to know the nitty-gritties about this. This is just an example. Okay, then we save this. Okay, and notice we're not trying to render any element into the chat widget. That's why even here when we're importing, we didn't do trace and trying to also get in the element, because we're not rendering an element within our chat widget. Okay, so let me remove that, save that, then let's import it within our HTML file. So extension 1, and I'll also import extension 2. Okay, then insert that extension 2 over here, then save that. Now that's connected. Let's go back to our Voiceflow agent and ensure the custom action is in place correctly. So instead of extension 1, in this case, let's call it extension 2. Okay, then in any case, instead of having all this, let's delete all that and have it just render a message immediately after the extension has been rendered, a random message, whatever it is. Okay, so let's pass in there, then let's publish this. successfully published. Okay, go back to my HTML just to show you why this is working. For the confetti effect, we're using an external JavaScript library, so I'll just import it and put it in here. So I'll paste it in there, as you can see there. Okay, and it also needs a canvas element to be able to render the confetti. Okay, so I'll paste it in there, then save this, then go back to our website. Then when I reload this, we start a new chart. Okay, you see that's the confetti appearing. Okay, and for the styling purposes, let me give it a bit of styling. Okay, so I'll paste in here some styling for the confetti, so save that. Then let me go back here, reload this, then when I start the chart again, you see there is a confetti. So it's an effect, it's not rendering anything within the chart window, but it's performing an action. So that's the nitty-gritties of understanding extensions. Being able to master how the custom action block works hand in hand with the extensions, your external extensions, enables you to build really powerful chatbots, such that whatever functionality or element that you need to implement within the chat window, you can always easily do that. Even if it's a custom element that you want to build from scratch, you can implement it within your chat window. So I would personally say extensions is like the most powerful feature within Voiceflow. So being able to master it properly enables you to be very, very powerful of a developer. So rewatch this video if you don't understand any part of it. Rewatch and relearn until you're able to understand the nitty-gritties that goes behind it. Anyways, that's it from me. Till next time, stay savvy. Peace.